The military also states that they were capable of handling the current situation and urges the public to trust the government. However, a crashed helicopter in the city suggested that the military's words were merely meant to calm the public's emotions. As Cha and two others head downstairs, they discover a man's body, still warm, indicating he had died recently. Jaisu finds a bag of snacks in the man's pocket and hands it to Cha. After Jung finishes praying for the deceased, Cha is suddenly attacked by an unidentified creature. He falls from the stairs and lands beside the ballet girl. Seeing Cha lying in a pool of blood, the ballet girl screams in horror. At this point, Cha's consciousness is blurred, and he dreams that he had arrived at his family's funeral. He kneels on the ground, crying and begging his family not to leave him. Just then, his relatives and friends appear behind him, seeing him as a monster and forcibly drag him away. Following this, Cha wakes up from the dream and finds out from Lee that he had fallen from the 9th floor and fully recovered in just 3 hours, implying that everyone knew he was infected. Later, Lee calls an emergency meeting of all survivors that night, discussing whether to keep Cha in the apartment complex. They decide to hold an anonymous vote. The supermarket owner starts causing trouble once more, threatening Che with a knife before the vote. He tries to convince everyone to kill Cha before he turns into a monster. However, no one is willing to do so. The final result turns out to be a draw, with equal votes, for and against. The supermarket owner does not accept the result and refuses to let a monster stay in the apartment. But the very next moment, he begins bleeding profusely from his nose, indicating he has also become infected. The owner finally quiets down, covering his nose and insisting that he was just tired and that was why he had a nosebleed. As he tries to leave, Cha stops him and says he also has the right to vote. In the end, he casts a vote in favor of kicking himself out. At that moment, the nosebleed-stricken owner passes out. Later, people whisper behind their backs, debating whether to kick the two out of the apartment. Since it is the emotion of desire that turns people into monsters, the supermarket owner must have become infected due to his greed and selfishness. When he wakes up, he asks Cha for advice, wanting to know how he has managed not to become a monster so far. However, Cha simply tells him to sober up. Meanwhile, Si-young learns from the dog lady that the soldier who lived in the apartment complex has died trying to save people. This news upsets her since he was one of the few good people with combat abilities in the community. Elsewhere, the photographer mutters to himself that he is still alive, his face showing a joyful smile. But just then, Wook appears and starts beating him without saying a word. The photographer rolls and crawls and manages to fight back briefly before running away at lightning speed. When he encounters other survivors, he lies claiming that he has been infected. He wipes the blood from his nose, which has been caused by Wook's beating, and asks everyone to lock him up in isolation. Before entering the isolation room, Jung asks him if there is another reason for his weird behavior. However, the photographer doesn't respond. After a while, Wook also finds the isolation room and tries to drag the photographer out, but is stopped by Jung. Eventually, the photograph looks at the two of them and closes the door of the isolation room himself. The following morning, Cha wakes up to find photographer next to him. It seems that he is trying to get closer to Cha on purpose and is curious about what it feels like to be infected. He wonders how to become like Cha, who had narrowly escaped death. Meanwhile, the supermarket owner's wife secretly gives Si-young a pregnancy kit, persuading her to take the test for peace of mind. In room 1408, the woman with the empty baby pram cuts vegetables when she suddenly starts to transform. Worried about hurting the two children, she quickly hides in the bathroom. An hour passes, and she still doesn't come out. The little girl goes to tell the veteran, who is busy with his weapons and hasn't noticed the strange woman's abnormality. He then opens the bathroom door and finds that the strange woman has started to evolve into a giant womb-like creature, nurturing new life within and incapable of attacking humans. On the ground floor, Lee discovers the weapons in the hands of Jung and learns that there is a weapons master in the apartment. Lee then calls Che out of the isolation room, which annoys the supermarket owner. He warns Cha that he will be used by Lee. Outside, Lee tells Cha straightforwardly that he could help him leave, but only if he took on the dangerous tasks handed to him. Lee wants him to bring the veteran on the 14th floor to the ground floor. In a flashback scene, it is revealed that Wook had stolen a key from the photographer earlier during their conflict. He insists on opening the sealed staircase door to go upstairs, which seems to be related to the key in his hand. In the meantime, Lee tells Cha that the primary target is the veteran, and the two children are secondary. They could abandon the children if necessary. However, Si-young is furious when she learns that Lee is using Che. However, Che agrees to the task because he has seen through everything. No matter how severe the injuries are, he could always survive. He knows that the monster transformation is actually a matter of willpower, and he has an exceptional willpower to resist the mutation. This makes him a potential weapon in the war against the monsters. Lee then shows Cy Young an article on the infection by the anonymous blogger that he had read earlier. Coincidentally, she had seen this article on her fiancé's tablet before and suspects a connection between her fiancé and the blogger. Meanwhile, midway in his mission, Cha begins to transform. He opens the door to the staircase intending to kill the monsters. Fortunately, Wook appears just in time to knock Cha back to his senses. However, as soon as the man turns around, a monster with long arms and immense speed captures him. Just then, a masked girl wielding a bow and arrow shoots the monster's hand, causing it to flee. Luckily, Wook is still alive, but the room behind him is full of corpses. It appears the monster has been bringing people here and then draining them of their life energy. The masked girl turns out to be a hospice nurse named Yu Ri. Beside her is an old man named Kang. On the ground nearby, they find a diary that belongs to the monster. It turns out the monster was once a human who lost his child to an accident due to his inability to hold onto his son's hand. The thought of having longer arms to save his son became an obsession, eventually causing him to mutate into the long-armed monster. After Wook wakes up, Yuri attempts to dress his wounds, but he is ungrateful and leaves the room without even saying thank you. Kang advises her not to worry as the man seems capable of handling himself. At this point, she notices Cha's injuries and tries to help, but he too resists. However, Kang realizes Cha is infected and warns Yuri to stay away while threatening Che with a crossbow. Just then, they notice Che's facial wounds healing on their own. Frightened, Kang tells him to leave quickly, but as he turns to go, he hears Kang laughing behind him. The old man explains that he was simply joking. When the two new strangers learn that Che is heading to the 14th floor, Kang offers to lend a hand. Meanwhile, in the isolation room, the supermarket owner's wife hides a knife behind her back, watching her husband resting on the couch. It is revealed that the supermarket owner is not only selfish but also frequently abuses his wife. She tells him that if she ever becomes a monster, she will definitely kill him. However, she would rather do it while she's still alive as a human. But the man doesn't take her words to heart as her actions seem more like a warning than threat. As she leaves, the photographer inquires about Wook's whereabouts and learns that he has gone upstairs. He panics and searches his body, only to find that he has lost his keys. His frantic behavior suggests he is afraid of Woon discovering something. Upstairs, Wook uses the keys to open an iron door, revealing a room where the photographer develops photographs. It turns out the photographer is actually a pervert who uses his volunteer status to gain access to children. He had also kidnapped a little girl for abuse and taken numerous horrendous photos of her. The photographs in the room serve as evidence of his crimes. Elsewhere, Yuri and Kang successfully reach room 1408. They inquire about the whereabouts of the strange woman, but only find a gigantic womb creature hidden in the bathroom. They can vaguely see a huge baby inside and occasionally hear the baby's cries. Meanwhile, Seung finally musters the courage to take an early pregnancy test, confirming that she is indeed pregnant. Similarly, Jung and Jisoo are unwilling to sit and wait for their doom, so they try to find a way out of the complex. They discover a large white cloth and spray it with a red SOS signal using spare paint. They then hang the cloth outside the apartment to call for help. On the other hand, worried that his dark secret will be exposed by Wook, the photographer deliberately cuts his hand to prove to others that he hasn't been infected as he doesn't possess the rapid healing ability. Seeing this, everyone quickly releases him. However, he shows no interest in their concern and nervously leaves the scene. Then, he finds a bathroom stall and retrieves a hidden hammer that he had previously used to commit a crime. Soon afterwards, an enraged Wook arrives on the ground floor and bumps into Jung. His phone falls to the floor, but he doesn't bother picking it up. However, before he can confront the photographer, the latter launches a surprise attack and strikes Wook's head with the hammer. Despite blood pouring from the wound, Wook quickly overpowers his assailant and takes his hammer. As the photographer walks towards the others, he slanders Wook, calling him a murderer. However, no one dares to step forward and stop the conflict. Enraged, Wook repeatedly smashes the hammer into the photographer's face, but this is not enough to quench his anger. He drags the corpse to the entrance of the building and takes the body out of the building, intending to let the long-tongued monster feed on it. After that, a physically drained Wook stumbles to the entrance without any intention of going back inside. He tries to close the door, thinking that he can no longer be accepted by the people in the apartment. However, Jung stops him. It turns out that Wook had brought back the corpses of the soldier and the Gangnam woman's daughter to the apartment. Although Wook appears fierce, he is actually a good person. But due to his injuries, he passes out soon afterwards. Suppressed for a long time, the Gangnam woman finally releases her emotions. She embraces the two kids who also lost their loved ones, and the three of them cry together. Everyone buries the soldier and the girl in an empty room. Kang salutes the soldier's grave, revealing that he is also a retired veteran. Young tries to comfort the Gangnam woman, who says she will become stronger because she is a mother. Later, Cha also receives a new mission from Lee, taking an electric gun to the outer staircase of the building. Outside the building, the long-tongued monster is feasting on the photographer's corpse when the muscular monster suddenly appears. With both hands, he grabs the monster like an ant, revealing himself to be a heavyweight among other monsters. When Wook wakes up, he doesn't realize the person beside him is Yuri, a nurse, and grabs her neck. Fortunately, he stops before she is choked to death. However, Yuri has an asthma attack and rushes to the door and sprays the inhaler in her mouth. Meanwhile, Young goes alone to the power distribution room to retrieve her lost cell phone. She realizes that her fiancé might be the blogger and wants to leave the apartment to investigate it further. Following this, she gets the motorcycle keys from Kang and leaves the community in a cloud of dust. In order to survive, Kang establishes a set of survival rules for Green Home. They need to form teams of at least 2 people, taking turns patrolling and reporting any anomalies immediately. Also, they should provide only a set amount of food for 1 meal per day to conserve resources. What's more, everyone's temperature should be taken at 8 p.m. every night to ensure the infected are detected as soon as possible. Later that evening, Cha, who left early in the morning, finally returns from gathering supplies for everyone. After completing his task, he obediently returns to the isolation room. The following morning, Lee comes to the door of the isolation room and hands Cha a note detailing his task for the day. The following scene shows him setting up fishing lines in the passageways, attaching bells and balloons to them as a warning system for any monsters. Then, he searches each room in the building for the items everyone needs. Unfortunately, Cha encounters a lightning-fast monster downstairs. On the ground floor, a female resident on patrol blows her whistle as a hairy monster approaches. Although its face is not visible, the supermarket lady recognizes it as her husband, who was bald and always wore a wig. This might explain why he has turned into a hairy monster due to his obsession. She walks up to her husband with a stick, intending to deal with him personally. After a single blow, her husband regains his sanity. She then asks him if he has any last words, and he only asks her to terminate him. In front of everyone, she beats her husband to death. Afterwards, she falls into immense grief because before he died, her husband apologized to her. She had been waiting for his apology for 30 years, but there's no turning back now. Just then, Che returns to the apartment and sees the supermarket owner dead. His dark persona emerges again, telling him that this will be his future. Fortunately, he suppresses the evil power within him, leaves the supplies he found, and departs alone to the isolation room. Elsewhere, Young goes to the hospital where her fiancé worked before his death. In a flashback scene, it is revealed that a fire had broken out there, killing her fiancé. However, suspiciously, his body was never found. Despite her superior's objections, Young submitted her resignation letter and went to the fire scene to search for her fiancé's body. Back in the present, Young successfully finds her fiancé's tablet in a drawer at the hospital. She then discovers an article written by the said blogger in the memo. It's now clear that her fiancé is the blogger himself. It is revealed that he discovered the mutations early on and volunteered as a test subject previously. Lee and Cha had only seen half of the article on the blog, but Young sees the rest on the tablet. Through self-experimentation, her fiancé found out that as long as he could survive for 15 days, he would become stable and turn into a special infected person. While Young is engrossed in reading, she suddenly finds several guns pointed at her. It turns out that the military has arrived, and they take her away. At the apartment complex, the power is cut off to save electricity. This causes everyone to panic as they worry about not being able to last without electricity much longer. Not only is there a lack of electricity, but water and food are also running out. Back in the isolation room, Cha fights with his dark self once again in his sleep. His dark side tries to lure him into desire, which would inevitably lead to him mutating into a monster. However, he manages to defeat it again with his willpower. On the other hand, Young is captured and hung up by the military. From them, she learns that her fiancé was involved in the military's experiments. She hadn't found her fiancé's body back then, and although he chose to end his life, he had most likely turned into a monster. The military initially planned to silence Young by killing her since she knew too much, but she tells the military personnel that she knows someone who can resist mutation, which is what they're looking for. She agrees to help the military find Cha in exchange for sparing her life and the child in her womb. At the apartment, After being attacked by the spider monster, Cha finds himself wrapped in spider silk and hanging upside down, enveloped by a pile of green slime. Meanwhile, Lee and others form a rescue team and arrive at the parking lot to save Cha. The green slime senses their presence and leaves Cha's body. Nearby, they discover the lightning-fast monster is also there, but it appears to be sleeping. To avoid waking it up, they decide to walk around it. However, after trapping Cha, the spider monster infiltrates the building to hunt its next target, the sister among the siblings. At the critical moment, the veteran appears with his homemade cannon. However, due to his limited mobility, he falls flat on the ground, and unfortunately, the sister is captured by the spider monster in the parking lot. In the meantime, the group successfully rescues an unconscious Cha and prepares to leave when Jisoo suddenly experiences stomach pain. Her weapon falls to the ground, causing a commotion that awakens the lightning-fast monster. Lee shoots out one of the monster's eyes, but he is sent flying like a toy. However, he uses a car alarm to attract the monster's attention, buying some time for the group to escape. But the monster still pursues the rest of the group. Just as they are about to face their demise, Lee drives a van to knock over the monster, allowing everyone to quickly enter the vehicle. The car speeds through the chaos, looking for an exit while encountering more mutated monsters that had been hiding in the parking lot. The relentless monsters climb onto the car, with one of them grabbing Jisoo's hair. With his fast thinking skills, Jung decisively uses a samurai sword to chop her hair and save her from the monsters. Eventually, the van crashes into a mound of dirt and comes to a halt. The packages in the trunk spill out, and everyone has no choice but to flee on foot. At that moment, the monsters re-emerge. In the nick of time, Kang uses a flamethrower to sweep through the monsters, setting them ablaze. Although the monsters have regenerative powers, they cannot regenerate once they are burned to ashes. On the other side, the veteran is still struggling with the spider monster while the little girl gets captured. Eventually, Uriah and the ballet girl work together to trap the spider monster. The little girl immediately throws a burning lighter at the monster, but this doesn't cause fatal damage. Fortunately, Cha and the others return just in time. He stabs the electric knife into the monster's body and shocks it for a while. Finally, after a long battle, the monster stops moving. The problems in the apartment can no longer be concealed, so Lee tells everyone about his plan. With only 5 days of food reserves left, they need to venture outside to find supplies. Everyone assumes that Cha will be the one to go, but this time Lee entrusts the task to Wook, who reluctantly agrees. Previously, when Jisoo rescued Cha in the parking lot, she had become unwell. Now she finally collapses, looking extremely pale. No matter how much she knocks on the door, the ballet girl who's idling in the bathroom refuses to open it. After a while, the noise outside the door disappears. When the ballet girl opens the door, she finds Jisoo lying on the floor. Lee, a medical school graduate, diagnoses her with acute appendicitis. Since he has no medical equipment, Wook Yu-ri and Cha volunteer to find the required equipment. While the apartment residents start preparing the operating table, the trio drives away in a modified car. However, they don't get far before a car accident occurs. The accident is caused by the muscular monster, which has grown several times larger than before. It had previously captured the long-tongued monster and has likely kept consuming both humans and monsters, causing its body to grow larger. The people in the apartment hear the sound of the car crash and realize they are in danger. Unable to wait any longer, Jisoo undergoes surgery without anesthesia. Lee warns her of the risks and possible post-surgery infections. With her informed consent, he begins the operation. As soon as the first incision is made, she faints from the pain. Outside, Kang sees the others in danger and rushes out with a flamethrower. As the creature tries to put out the fire, Kang helps Cha, who's been thrown out of the car. However, the creature quickly blocks their path. Kang, who seems to be seriously ill, coughs up a large amount of blood. He initially planned to sacrifice himself to protect Cha, but suddenly Young, who has been released by the military, appears on the spot with a fire truck. The fire truck crashes directly into the muscular monster, but causes very little harm. The creature retaliates by grabbing Young from the driver's seat and tossing her aside. While she is dealing with the creature, Wook rescues his friends who are trapped inside the modified car. Soon after, the car explodes and catches fire. This causes a massive chasm on the ground and the beast falls into it. Young seizes the opportunity and knocks down a burning billboard, successfully killing the creature. Although everyone is injured in this incident, there are no life-threatening injuries. When they return to the apartment, Lee has already completed the surgery. He tells Jung that whether Jisoo survives depends on fate. As compensation for losing Kang's motorcycle, Young brings back an asthma inhaler for Uri. Next, she finds Cha and asks him if he remembers when he was infected, what the initial symptoms were. and how he managed to survive until now. Cha is somewhat confused by the questions and only answers that he could survive because he still wants to live. Si Young then tells him that the military is conducting secret experiments, observing the process of some subjects fighting against monster transformations, hoping to find a solution to the crisis. However, these subjects either die or transform into monsters. Only one person has successfully survived for 15 days and then disappeared without a trace. So the military is likely to come looking for Che.